What's up, everyone? Sam here from ByteByByte.com, and in this video, I want to talk about the advantages of working at a startup versus working at a big tech company. All right, so as I mentioned in this video, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of working at startups versus working at big tech companies. And I think this is really important because so often when I talk to people, I hear like the same couple companies over and over again. Right? Everyone basically wants to work at a FAANG company, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Right? Everyone wants to work at one of those companies, but there are actually a lot of advantages to working at a startup that you might not think about, as well as advantages to working at those big tech companies. And so I want to talk about the pros and cons of both in this video so that you can make an accurate decision about which is going to be the right fit for you. So first of all, what are the pros of working at a startup? Well, there are several different things, but I think there are three that are the most important. And this is also coming a lot from my own experience. When I started out, I was working at a relatively small company. So I'm a little bit biased towards the startup, but I'm going to try and give you as impartial of a view as possible. And so number one is that you have more ownership, right? At a big tech company, there's so many projects going on, and the teams are so big that you just, as a new employee, this is especially as a new college grad, you don't have as much ownership over the products. You're working on much smaller tasks in the grand scheme of things because that's just what the company needs. But the fact of the matter is that you don't get necessarily to grow quite as fast, and you don't get that same level of ownership. When I was working at my first job, pretty soon on, I was taking on like whole projects by myself because there just wasn't enough human power to do it any other way. And so I got a lot of experience very quickly going through that process. And that's something that you get a lot more at startups than you would at a big company. Now, number two, sort of going along with the first topic, is you're going to get to touch a lot more technologies. You're going to be a lot more full stack because, again, there are just not as many people. And so because there are not as many people, you're going to be having to handle a lot more stuff yourself. And so this can be a pro or a con depending on what you're looking at. Again, like if you're a new grad and you're fresh out of college and you're trying to figure out what you're interested in, a startup is probably going to have a lot more wiggle room, at least in the short term, for you to figure out like, what do I want to focus on? What excites me? Where do I ultimately want to go deeper? Like if I take that next job, do I want to do a front end job? Do I want to do a back end job? Do I want to be a full stack engineer? These are the things that you can figure out at a startup much more easily than you can at a big company. And finally, I think this is probably pretty obvious, but advancement opportunities are there in a way at small companies that they're often not at larger companies. Because if you think about it, as a company is growing, the people grow with the company, right? If you're at a company like Google, there are thousands and thousands of managers. The only time when there is a spot open for a new manager is basically when one of those managers leaves, right? So you're essentially waiting for spots to open up for you if you want to get promoted to that next level. But at a small company, as you're growing, they're always looking for more managers. They're always looking to move people up. And so just by being there, you have opportunities to advance in your career. You have opportunities to advance to like higher levels because you are the one who's been around for the longest, and so you're like the obvious choice. Now, of course, they could hire someone above you, and that always happens from time to time, but you have a lot more opportunities assuming that you're a good engineer. So those are the pros of working at a startup, but I also want to talk about the pros of working at a big company because there are a lot of advantages to working at a big company, especially like a FAANG company, as opposed to working at a startup. So first of all, you have that brand recognition. And especially as a new grad, the brand recognition can be huge, right? Because if you think about it, think about like how many companies there are that basically say, we have 5x Googlers on our team, or, we have 5x Apple engineers, whatever it is. Companies love to say these sorts of things because they understand the brand that goes with it. And in the same way, as an individual, you get a lot of doors open to you by having names like that on your resume that might not be open to you otherwise. So the brand recognition can be really huge. It can be really helpful for you as you're trying to advance in your career, because if you're if you've worked at one of these top tech companies, a smaller company might want to hire you as like an engineering manager or a tech lead, depending on what level you're at. So you'll have potentially, just by that brand recognition, have more opportunities for advancement. The second thing that is really valuable, especially if you're earlier on in your career, is that you have potential for there to be a lot stronger people and a lot more mentorship opportunities. Right? At bigger companies, they attract the best talent. Right? Companies like Google and Facebook are going to attract a lot of the best engineers because they can really be selective about who they are hiring. They have that brand recognition. They have everyone wanting to work there. And so you know that most of your other colleagues are going to be great engineers. Of course, that's not 100% of people. It's never going to be 100%, but you know that you can have confidence that there are really good people working with you. And there are really good opportunities for mentorship. So, when you're working with people and when you're working on a team, you learn so much from the people around you. And there's a popular phrase from Jim Rohn that is, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And that extends to your job, that extends to your colleagues, and it's so valuable to have really strong engineers around you because you are going to grow faster, you're going to get more skilled, and that's going to allow you to advance and get better yourself. And then finally, stability. Right? Big companies are just inherently more stable than smaller companies. Big companies are going to give you those opportunities for, you're going to have the 401k. You're going to have the, as opposed to taking stock options that may or may not be worth anything, you might get RSUs, which actually have value. Right? Like when I started at a startup, I didn't know whether my stock options were actually going to be worth anything at all. And I happened to get lucky that the company I was working at, Yext, went public while I was there, so I actually was able to cash in on that. But if they hadn't gone public, those wouldn't have been worth anything. And so it just depends what you're looking for, right? In that case, and you have with those bigger companies, you might make a little bit less money on like the stock options, but you have that stability. You know that they're less likely to fire you because they're less likely to have to downsize. They're less likely to go out of business. And so those are some of the advantages of working at a large company as opposed to working at a startup. And so at the end of the day, it really comes down to sort of your risk reward, and it also comes down to where you can get a job. But one thing that I want to suggest that I found, especially if you're a new grad out there, that was really, really helpful for me was sort of finding a company that was in the middle. Right? When I started at Yext, there were probably 60 or so engineers. And what that meant was that there were enough engineers that there were some really smart people. I was able to learn from some really great mentors. But at the same time, I was able to take on whole projects to myself. And I was able to learn exactly I was able to learn so much and advance so much faster than I would have otherwise because I was just given that responsibility. And so I would highly encourage new grads, if you have the opportunity to work at one of those top tier big companies, the name recognition can be really helpful. But otherwise, look for those mid-tier companies. Look for those companies where you're going to have the best opportunity to learn, because that's what's going to help you the most in your career. And that's what's going to get you the most advancement and get you where you want to go. And so with that, that's all I got for this video. Definitely let me know in the comments below, are you gonna go for a startup? Are you gonna go for a big company? I'm really curious to hear what you think. Make sure you subscribe, and if you don't have it already, go over to our site and download our free 50 interview questions guide. I go through 50 of the most common coding interview questions. You can get a ton of practice there, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.